The muses of ancient Greek myth look out across the Seine from the frontage of 14 Quai de la Mégisserie in Paris in the form of medallions carved with female heads in profile, each inscribed with the name of the muse she represents. They were made by the sculptor Aimé Millet, who provided the ornamental decoration for this building, constructed between 1864 and 1866. In the central position above the main entrance is Polyhymnia, the muse of sacred music and poetry. Her head is a portrait of the artist Berthe Morisot. Millet, a successful sculptor, was a family friend of the Morisots, who took Berthe as a student in his studio for about 6 months over the winter of 1863-4. None of her sculpture survives, only this portrait medallion of her by her teacher. Although it is not by her own hand, this portrait does in a way mark Berthe Morisot's emergence into the world as an artist. Her period in Millet's studio was the final stage in an artistic education gained entirely in the studios of practicing artists. She, with her sister Edma, trained with the drawing master Geoffroy-Alphonse Chocarne, the painters Joseph Benoît Guichard, Camille Corot, and Achille François Oudinot, and finally Aimé Millet. Millet was a teacher at the École Nationale Supérieure des Arts Décoratifs, but Berthe Morisot was his student not at that institution, but privately. Women were not admitted there until 1890. Morisot never followed a formal course of academic study in an established institution of arts education. For her, unlike her male contemporaries, those avenues of artistic formation were closed. The study of anatomy and drawing from the nude model, and particularly the male nude model, was an essential part of academic training in the arts. It was seen as fundamental to the mastery of close observation and accurate representation. It also encouraged the development of the skills and techniques needed to practice the highest genres of art, such as history painting and the depiction of themes from the Bible and classical mythology, in which mastery of the figure was essential. Berthe Morisot had no opportunity to gain this training or experience. In her time, women art students were able to draw from the dressed or draped female model, but drawing from the male nude, even if partially draped, was not acceptable for women, on the grounds of propriety, modesty, and morality. This perception would not change until the last quarter of the 19th century, and in many cases, life classes with the male nude would not be available to women until after the turn of the century. That does not mean that Morisot did not paint the human figure. Her artistic education, while informal by the standards of the Academy, was thorough and rigorous. Under the supervision of Guichard, for example, she had spent long hours copying in the Louvre, and the figure, particularly the female figure, became a primary focus of Morisot's artistic practice from an early stage. She painted landscapes, interiors, and still life, but figures are constantly present in her work, in her portraits, usually whole or part figure, in figure groups, family and domestic scenes, and in her landscapes, which are never unpopulated. The world Morisot painted was the world she knew, a female-centered world, of home and garden, family and domestic sociability. Her pictures are filled with women and girls. She rarely painted men. Her art is, inevitably, concerned with the female physical presence in the world, and thus with the female body. The nude, however, formed no part of Morisot's practice for the first 30 years of her career. This was not unusual. There were many reasons, social, cultural, and personal, for women artists of her era to avoid the nude. But from the 1880s, a change occurs, and the partial and full nude appears more and more in drawings and sketches and in finished works in oils and pastel. Why was this? Domestic scenes had always been at the heart of Morisot's work, and, following the birth of her daughter Julie in 1878, she explored this domestic and intimate feminine world with a new sense of complexity. She depicted women at their toilettes, in their bedrooms and dressing rooms, often in states of partial undress, bringing a distinctively personal and female approach to a topic which had long found favour with male artists, whose works, shaped by the male gaze, were very different in character. The female subjects Morisot depicts in these pictures are shown as the inhabitants of their own world, living their lives rather than engaging in a performance, not posed as an ornament or an object of sexual interest to be consumed by the onlooker. The mood in these scenes is coolly introspective rather than languorous or eroticized. Nudity itself is always partial or in some way withheld in Morisot's work. Her male contemporaries, such as Renoir, Manet, and Degas, trained in practices and working in artistic cultures in which the nude was taken for granted, could present nudity without compromise or constraint. Individual works of theirs provoked controversy and criticism, but they did not face any questioning of their right to paint in this way, and could shrug off suggestions of immorality or compromised respectability. Morisot, a woman painter in a bourgeois world, did not have that luxury. For Morisot, too, the very radicalism of Impressionism itself paradoxically worked against the full exploration of the nude as a theme. The most uncompromising nudes painted by women artists in the later 19th century were presented as classical goddesses or biblical figures, as in the work of Henrietta Ray and Anna Lee Merritt. Their work stirred controversy and hostility, but any charges of impropriety or immorality were blunted by this armor of genre. Impressionism, the art of everyday life, offered no such acceptable protections for the nude. Despite these limitations, during the 1880s, the partially undraped female figures of the toilette clearly drew Morisot towards more consideration of the female body as a subject for artistic exploration in its own right. Other influences were her interest in the work of her Impressionist contemporaries, most importantly Renoir, her enthusiasm for the art of the 18th century, particularly the work of François Boucher, and her renewed interest in drawing, with preparatory drawings assuming a new importance in her practice. Her personal and practical circumstances also played a role. In the summer of 1883, after a period of unsettled movement between temporary homes, she and her family moved into their newly refurbished apartment at Rue de Villejuste in Paris, which included a large room which she used as a combined living room and studio. This gave her new space to work and new privacy, and it is from this period that she began to work from nude models. The example of other female artists who were similarly reclaiming the nude as a subject for their work was also important. Mary Cassatt, who was also making her first experiments with the nude, was an important influence. The two women drew and painted together in the spring of 1890, inspired by an exhibition of Japanese prints at the Académie des Beaux-Arts, where they both responded to themes such as a woman before a mirror. The early 1890s was a difficult time for Morisot. With the illness of her husband, Eugène Manet, he died in April 1892, taking a heavy toll on her health and well-being. But it was also a period of sustained and intense artistic activity for her. She continued her exploration of the nude as a theme, producing studies not only of models in the studio in Paris, but of girls and young women from the farms and villages around Mézy, where the Morisots had a country retreat. Her studies of a young local shepherdess, both dressed and undressed, sit within a pastoral tradition which relates the female body to the fertility and beauty of nature itself. The nonchalant pose of her shepherdess, which has little parallel in other artists' treatment of the nude figure, making her appear completely at home in the landscape. In these drawings and paintings, Morisot depicts the nude with fluid economy of line and an easy capturing of light and form, but still maintains a careful balance between freedom and restraint. She would achieve her greatest freedom and eroticism in her interpretations of the work of another artist, the 18th century Rococo painter François Boucher. In 1884, Morisot copied a portion of Boucher's The Forges of Vulcan of 1757, installing the extract as an overdoor panel in her new studio in Paris. She took not the main events of the picture, but a subsidiary motif, two female figures looking on from a vantage point in the clouds. The result is an image of women in self-contained tranquillity, companionable, observing what goes on around them, but seemingly unconcerned by it. Morisot echoes Boucher's celebration of the beauty of the female body, but adds to this little scene an atmosphere of calmly retired contemplation that is all her own, and which may have reflected her feelings about the sanctuary provided by her new studio. Morisot's second adaptation of a theme from Boucher, executed in 1892, has a very different feeling to it, suggesting the distance the artist had travelled since beginning to pay greater attention to the female nude in the 1880s. From Boucher's Apollo reveals his divinity to the shepherdess Issei of 1750, she again took an extract from the canvas involving onlookers rather than main participants, painting a study of the two river nymphs or naiads from the left foreground of the canvas. For Boucher, the significance of these two female figures is as witnesses to the main event of the picture, Apollo's abandonment of his mortal lover. By taking them out of that context, Morisot was able to emphasize an aspect which Boucher had only implied, their preoccupation with each other. The two entwined female bodies were for Boucher just one aspect of the decorative content of his canvas. For Morisot, they became the primary focus of their little world. What is extraordinary about Morisot's painting is her drawing out of what had for Boucher been only casually implied, the homoerotic content of the image. Boucher represented the two naiads as if surprised out of sleep by the apparition of the god. Morisot's interpretation, with no divine presence, suggests that they have been momentarily distracted from a preoccupation with each other. The naiad looking across to the right in Boucher's original has wide eyes, and her mouth is slightly open, conveying surprise. In Morisot, her eyes are more abstracted, and her lips are closed and slightly pouting. She seems to be listening to and reacting to whatever her companion is saying into her ear, rather than to anything external. The result is an atmosphere of self-contained and entirely female physical and emotional intimacy. Males, whether divine or just mortal, are a matter of no interest here. In this painting, from late in her career, Morisot's sometimes tentative, sometimes intense, decade-long preoccupation with the female nude finds its resolution in a visual expression which, although ironically derived from the work of a male painter, is in content, focus, and expression a self-enclosed, self-sufficient, and entirely female world, a world of female feeling, female sensuality, and the female body.